Welcome to Apparent Inspiration with Susan and Santhosh Mathews. Real inspiration for real life.
Welcome, Susan.
Welcome.
So it's good to see you today, as
Great
I've
to
been
see
seeing you every day, so that's not a new thing. But it's good to see all of you. I'm glad you're back. I hope you're enjoying these brief teaching sessions, learning sessions, encouragement sessions, whatever they are. We've been teaching about faith and real life situations and all that. But today, we want to talk about something very interesting. Okay, we want to talk about human trafficking. So we started this episode about 2 episodes ago on human trafficking. Today is episode number 6. And in episodes number 4 and 5, we talked about the slavery of the soul, right, where sin has dominion over our soul. But today, we want to go into the physical aspect of human trafficking.
That's right.
Because that is something that we need to talk about. So we're going to have a heart-to-heart talk about it. It's going to be educational. Remember, we are taping this in 2021 in the month of January. So the numbers can change, the statistics can change. But one thing we know that is unchanging is our Lord Jesus Christ. So, Susan, so I wanted to ask you, what is human trafficking?
Sure.
And if you can define and talk about human trafficking, we have our laptop. We want to make sure that we get the statistics right.
All of our notes.
Got our notes, so you'll see us moving around. So hope that is okay.
And we'll also have a book reading.
We will have a book reading. This is going to be special. So make sure that you don't show the book. Make sure that you wait for the end, okay? Because this is a profound, awesome book. It's called If Philip Can.
You can too.
How I survived
abortion,
24 surgeries, and high school. Was written by our son,
Philip Mathews.
The amazing Philip Mathews.
That's
so
right.
Let's get started.
All right.
Talk to us about human trafficking. You define it, talk about it. The floor is yours.
Right. Well, human trafficking, you may have heard a lot about it, especially in the month of January, because January is Human Trafficking Awareness Month. Basically, it's the names that you hear. Human, meaning it involves all humans, and trafficking. And trafficking, meaning that we are using, this is actually a form of modern-day slavery, and it's a crime. It is a crime when someone uses force, fraud, or coercion to force you to do something, to control you to do something for the purpose of getting profit for them. So there are many ways of human trafficking. Human trafficking is what we call the umbrella term, and underneath it are so many ways that people are unfortunately using this evil crime to profit off of others, off of humans, off of children, off of boys and girls, off of minor children, off of babies, off of men and women. There is no exclusion. Everyone, unfortunately, can be involved and can be trapped in this crime called human trafficking. And age is not a discriminatory factor. All ages, unfortunately, are included in this. And so we're going to talk about different ways that people are trafficked, different categories that happens. But we can be sure of one thing, that wherever people are, human trafficking can happen. And so this is a global problem. This is not a problem that happens only in Asia. This is not a problem that only happens in the red light districts. This is not a problem that only happens to women. This is a problem that affects every person on this earth, in every continent. It is a global issue.
So you're saying it does not discriminate by age or gender?
That's right.
And it impacts everybody in this world?
It impacts everyone. Yeah, that's right. And we're going to find out reasons why and how that's going on, and talk a little bit about that. I think today we wanted to focus on one form of trafficking.
Right. So, what are the different forms of trafficking? Just highlight them, and then we'll narrow down to the different ones that you want to talk about today.
Sure. When you talk about human trafficking, the most common one that people know about is sex trafficking, forcing someone to perform sexual acts against their will and making profit off of that. But there are many other forms. There's labor trafficking. There's child soldiers. There are children. We talk about child marriages. There are methods of using children and adults' organs, harvesting their organs. There's child beggary. There's putting people on the street and forcing them to beg, and they could be normal kids. They could be kids that have deformities or adults that have deformities. There are ways to traffic children who do have disabilities, and that is one way that Love Without Reason specifically is involved in, because we work with children that are born with facial birth defects and fight for their lives and fight for their survival in this world. So there are many different forms.
Wow, that's a whole range. You're talking about sex trafficking, you're talking about beggary, you're talking about child soldiers, child marriages.
Yes.
Wow. And then, of course, you said organ harvesting, and now you also said children with deformities are also trafficked.
That's right.
So how did you get involved in this? Before we go into the topic that you chose today, this will go on through a few episodes. So we'll give you a very in-depth analysis and understanding into human trafficking. We as founders of Love Without Reason are in the fight against human trafficking to stop it, to prevent it before it starts. That's one of our mottos. So we are focused on this. We want to bring awareness on this worldwide. People need to know what's happening in the human trafficking arena, so that you will know how to identify it. You'll know how to figure out what to do. You'll know how to stop these kind of things happening. Okay, so we will. So Susan, why this interest in human trafficking, and why did you want to do this?
Sure. Well, I'll tell you that I had no idea what sex trafficking was. I had no idea what the word was. And I was driving home from my job. This was probably in 2006 or early 2007. And I had the radio on, and I was listening to an interview with the Shared Hope International president, who is former Congresswoman Linda Smith. And she was being interviewed on the radio, and she was talking about why she started the organization. She had been invited to come to India, to the city of Mumbai, India, and she was told that you will see children there being sold, and they are, some of them, in cages, and they are being sold. And she just could not believe that this was happening in the world. And so she was explaining to the interviewer, what she saw. She said she had to go to India. She went on the infamous Falkland Road, and she saw it for herself. She saw children being sold in cages. And she says, the first thing that she thought of was her grandchildren. Wow. All she could think about was her little grandchildren. And she couldn't believe that this was happening in the world. So I'm listening to her and her story on the radio, and I remembered pulling over, and I just couldn't stop crying. I was like, how is this happening in India? This is our motherland. How is this? Why is this happening? How can they get away with this? Who is doing this? And what is happening to those children? What is their future? What is their life? And what are they going through day to day? And listening to the stories that Linda Smith was sharing about the grooming process of these children, how they are so psychologically tormented and tortured and physically abused until they do what their pimps tell them to do. I just could not believe it. And in listening to that and hearing her story, I tried to learn a little bit more. And it was in December 2007 when Santhosh came to me and said, God is telling me to start a nonprofit, to start an organization to help children that are born like our son Philip. We want to help these children with free facial surgery. And I heard him say what he had to say. He pitched it to me.
I'm a salesperson. What can I say?
And I was absolutely excited about the idea, but I told him, I'll join you and I'll support you only if you include Let's Fight Sex Trafficking. And he was like, sex trafficking? What is that?
I'm like, what does that have to do with facial surgeries? I mean, it doesn't make any sense.
It didn't make any sense. And even to me, it's not that it made sense to me, but it was just something in me. I was like, we can't hear about something like sex trafficking and turn away. So I want to bring up this quote by William Wilberforce. He says, "You may choose to look the other way, but you can never say again that you did not know." And that's what I told him. I was like, after hearing about this, what's going on in India, and my God, if it's happening all over the world, we can never say that we didn't know about it.
It's true.
We have to do something. And I didn't know what that answer was, but I just knew we had to do something. And so in 2007, we founded Love Without Reason, and then began focusing on what we knew would be easier, which was to work with the craniofacial surgeries. But in those trips that you went to India, that we would go and try to scout out, we also took some time to learn and see what we could learn about sex trafficking. And we had an opportunity to go into Mumbai.
Right.
And we had an opportunity to go into Kamathipura. Kamathipura is one of the largest red light districts in Asia. It's not the largest, but it's one of the largest in Asia. And walking through that place, I will never forget it. My first time there was in August of 2012, July 2012, August 2012. And walking through there, people talk about feeling oppressed. That is exactly how I felt. I mean, just walking through those dark stairwells, right. And it was like a coat, a blanket of oppression on you. I mean, you could see it,
feel it,
and feel it. Yeah, you could see it and feel it everywhere. As we walked through some of the areas, we had a person on the ground who we knew, and who was helping us and introducing us. He worked for an anti-trafficking organization that was based in India, and so he was kind of giving us a tour and showing us what the work was that they were doing. And as he was leading us through, it's like the way that I describe it. It was like the first building we went to. We had to go inside these dark stairwells, and there were no lights. It smelled like human waste. There were dead animals everywhere, just on the steps and things, and you had to watch where you stepped. There was no spotlights or, hallway lights or anything. So we're climbing up these stairs, and it's like climbing up an apartment building, like several stories high. And so we're climbing up, going around, and suddenly the corridor as we come outside gets very, very narrow. It's like only one person can walk through narrow. And so we're walking through, and as we see these doorways, in front of the doorway, there's a stool. And in most of those doorways, there's a man, just sitting there. And kind of like looking at us, like wondering why we're there, just very, it was a hostile kind of environment and a hostile look, wanting to know why we're there and what's going on. And our leader was kind of helping and calming things down so that we could actually go in. But we were trying to find somebody who spoke our native language in India, which is called Malayalam. And so we were going through these areas, and in each of these rooms where the stool was, if you go inside the room, you see a small little bathroom, and then a small area for a kitchen, and then there were like 3 bedrooms. And I went inside one of the bedrooms, and I saw that there were maybe 4 to 6 beds. And this is where each room, each of those apartments had maybe 18 to 20 people living in each of these small rooms. And the person who was outside, who was in charge of that room, we call them pimps, because they are the ones who are in charge of selling those people that are inside that room. They're the money handlers. They're trying to get customers. They're trying to entice people to come in and buy one of those girls and have sex with them and use them and discard them. And the money is pocketed with the pimp. In many cases, in the majority of the cases, the women never see that money. So as we walked inside, our leader was kind of going through and asking, hey, does anybody here speak Malayalam? And he went through a couple of doors, then we didn't find anybody on that floor, so we went up another floor. And someone said, yes, there's somebody here from Kerala. They speak Malayalam. So we went in there, and I didn't know what we were going to find. I didn't know what we could expect. I remember that Santhosh had his iPad with him, and he was holding the iPad case and walking through, and I was just walking in. And we both came and just sat down, and then this woman came to us. Her name was Mary. And she...
Name changed.
Yes, of course,
Right.
all the names are changed.
Right.
But Mary came and sat with us, and our leader introduced us and said, these people are from Kerala, and they just wanted to talk to somebody. And she looked at both of us, and when we say hostile, it was very hostile. And she just accused us.
Right. She got really, really angry just at looking at us.
Yes, very angry. And she said, did you come here with a Bible? Did you come here to judge me? I don't want your judgment. I don't want you. And she was just very angry. She didn't want to hear anything we had to say. And we opened up the iPad and said, we're not here to judge you. She wanted to know if we were pastors.
Right. And we are not.
And we're not. And we told her, no, ma'am, of course I'm saying this in the Indian language. I'm translating it for you. But I was like, no, ma'am, we're not. We're not pastors. We just have a story to share with you. And it's about our child. And I showed her a picture of Philip, our firstborn. And immediately her eyes softened. And she sat down. And she listened to us. And she went to go and get her baby pictures.
Right.
And she showed us her children. And her fourth child, she had 4 children. They were all in what we would call high school, I think, or early college. And the youngest one, the 4th child, was in a special school because the child had been born with developmental problems and needed specialized care and attention. So she immediately, I think, when she saw Philip's picture, she just latched on, and she knew that we knew the pain of having a child born in difficult circumstances with difficult diagnosis and was having a hard life. So she sat down and she listened to us share Philip's story with her. And we'll share that one day with you too. But as we shared Philip's story and shared about his miraculous birth and shared about his life and his struggles and the miracles that took place in his life, she began to cry and she opened up. And she told us, I'm sorry that I called you pastors, and I'm sorry I was angry. She said, people come in here all the time. Many people say that they want to help us. And one time, a pastor came in here, and he saw me, and he was carrying his Bible, and he wanted to know why I left my children and came here. He didn't even listen to see what my children are going through. He didn't even want to understand that I had no choice because I had to continue my children's school. And his question was simply, why didn't you put them in an orphanage so that you wouldn't have to work here? He didn't listen to her, was her complaint. And he didn't understand her. So we had to try to build another relationship with her.
Right. And her story was horrific.
It was a very horrific
how
story.
she came to be one of those sex slaves, or you could say prostitute in her case.
What is the distance from Mumbai to Kerala?
It's about maybe 1,200 kilometers.
So in miles, that is...
About 800.
800 miles. So you're talking about the distance from where? From Chattanooga to Dallas? Chattanooga to
Sure,
Houston?
yeah.
How in the world did she get there? She obviously does not know the Hindi language, Maharashtra language.
And it's difficult to travel in India
And it's difficult.
as a woman alone.
How did she get there? 800 miles from home, new language, different kind of culture. It's like north and south here for the U.S.
The journey of a woman or a child who's trafficked from her house or his house to the place where they are trafficked is very it's unique for everybody, and it's a traumatic journey. We have talked to hundreds, literally hundreds, of sex slaves, and we got their stories, and they are victims, and we will talk about some of those. So viewer discretion is advised as we talk about these things. So let's get into, as our time is getting to nearly a close. Let's start talking about sex trafficking. I think that's the biggest thing that most people are thinking about. Let's talk about it. What is sex trafficking, and what are the ways that people are trafficked? How are they trafficked? If you have any thoughts and insights on it. As you can gather, Susan is a resident expert in this area. Susan has been spending a lot of time ministering, both of us actually, but I think Susan has more of a understanding of this. So
Sure.
Just give us an overview, a worldwide overview about what is happening in the sex trafficking area.
Sure. When you talk about sex trafficking, they say that after drugs, sex trafficking is one of those crimes that is the most lucrative. In regards to that, when you talk about selling drugs to someone, you'll sell those drugs and that person uses them and it's gone. But when you talk about selling a child, you can sell them over and over and over again. Multiple times a day, and then multiple days a week, and then the weeks go on. And so they make these pimps and exploiters make money in selling people. And that's basically what they are doing. They're exploiting people. They're selling people. They're using vulnerable people for profit. And it is such a heinous crime, such a massacre of human rights that just angers me so much. And it happens worldwide. So the people do it for money. People do it for various reasons. Sometimes we hear about it in different countries. There may be different motivations. In the U.S., for instance, we don't hear so much about children with disabilities, I would say, being, selling, yes, and being child beggars, for instance. They're not on the street begging. And however, there are other ways, unfortunately, that children are being used, and we hear about that in the U.S. of people, of parents or adults, we could say, just looking for anything to sell in order to get their next drug high. And they create drugs, they make meth labs and create drugs, and or they are looking to purchase drugs, and in order to do that, they sell their child to someone. They gain profit, and then they're able to buy their drugs. We talk about, or we hear about familial human trafficking, meaning that the sex trafficking is happening in the family. It's very hard to hear about and see, but that also happens. And that may happen even internationally, not just in the U.S., but that is another form that we hear about with sex trafficking. So different ways that can happen. The common things that people think about is what they see in the movies, which is like the movies Taken and such like
Right.
that. So they think that people are kidnapped, children
Yeah,
are
it's
kidnapped.
dramatic.
It's a very dramatic thing, and they're brought. But sometimes it can be simple. It can be different and simple situations, like Mary's story, which with Mary's story, she and her husband, they had 4 children, like I said, and her husband got involved in some kind of a scheme, and he basically lost all his money. He didn't know how lost his home, and basically
he just vanished.
Escaped.
He just vanished,
and he left his wife and the kids.
Yeah.
The children were actually in school. They were in
Right.
some boarding schools.
But the debtors came and they wanted
Yeah.
to harm her, and so she had to escape. But then she didn't have money to take care of her
Right,
children.
and then a so-called friend came to her and said, I can give you a job,
Right.
get you a job in the city of Mumbai. So she went along with them.
So, Susan, approximately how many people do you think around the world are trafficked at any given time? Approximately. Of course, we
Sure.
can never have the real answers.
No, and we don't know, but
Right.
they would estimate maybe 40 plus million individuals trafficked worldwide. They say 25% of them are children.
Wow.
Under 18.
We're going to have to stop here, and because of the time in the episode, but we're going to come back and talk about how to identify, how people are trafficked. We're going to talk about a little bit more in details of the sex trafficking itself. Then we'll go into other forms of trafficking as well. So, as you hear this, I want you to say a prayer, and we'll also talk about the pimps. What about them? Do they deserve grace? Do they deserve mercy? What about the madams who are selling this? What about the pornography industry? There's so much that we can talk about, and we'll bring up all those things. So let me just give you a homework to do. As you're listening to this, would you take a minute to go to www.lovewithoutreason.org, lovewithoutreason.org, and look up what we do in terms of the anti-human trafficking work. And Susan, you want to quickly read that book?
Right. So I'm just going to read a quote from Philip, our son, who was walking through the red light areas. And this is what he said. Every time I walk into the red light areas, I have a fire inside me that wants to do something for these women and children. I want them to be free. I want them to be free. And we want to inspire you in that. Don't get caught up in the sadness of Mary's story.
Right.
Don't get caught up in the sadness of 40 million enslaved in the world and 25% children. Get caught up in the fact that we will overcome evil
Amen.
with good.
Amen.
We will overcome this evil
Amen.
with good.
Thank you for listening. This is Apparent Inspiration. Susan and Santhosh Mathews signing off with real inspiration
For
for
real
real
life.
life. We'll be back.